Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. It's an honor to the Rotary Club and especially to Ted Williams. Ted is a local fella, grew up in the area, spent time on Albion Ridge and in County, and now is a resident of the city of, the village of Mendocino. And so he is a true son of the area. Ted is the supervisor now in second term, is that correct? About 6 years in office. And District 5. District 5 runs from Jack Peters Creek down to the southern border, through the valley and over to Hopland. And between he and Bernie Norval, who was the District 4 representative, they represent the coast and they do a fabulous job. I would invite everyone to go to the Board of Supervisors meeting. I've had the honor of going to those for the last year or so, last couple of years. And our president, current president, Margaret last week, and I think it was pretty amazing. Thank you for being in Rotary. And let me introduce Ted Williams. Ted's a friend and quite the supervisor. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for coming out, and I want to thank Rotary for organizing the event. I love working with the public more than I like going to meetings. And there's really three groups that are my top favorites. One is working with kids, the time I spend in classrooms with kids. They're 100% about what we should do. They're not, some of us adults need to remember it can't all be fighting against what we want to stop. There needs to be energy towards what we want to build. Two is, I love going to fire, because in fire, there's no politics allowed, right? So it's a break. And then Rotary, I think this is an organization you should support, because like going to the classroom, it's positive, it's about what we should do, and we need less negativity in local politics. I want to tell you, I could talk for days about the problems that I found in the county. Many of these created over decades and will take decades to solve, but I really want to focus in a few key areas as you write questions. One is, you could replace your elected officials in this county, you could replace your staff, and you would have the same core problems. You have good people from all over the county. A lot of times, I'll drive over Highway 20 to that meeting in Ukiah the whole way telling myself, keep your mouth shut, calibrate your comments, right? Tone it down. And then on the way home, 253, 128 coming back, I say, I shouldn't have said that. But as much grief as I give them, they're good people who are looking out for their constituents and have the county's best interests in mind. The problem is not the other supervisors, and it's not the staff. When you read a lot of news articles, you know, the tone is typically somebody's done something bad or somebody's scheming. That's not the case. You have a system that is structured for a particular outcome, and we're seeing that outcome. And some of this was unintentional. You look at Prop 13, some people in the room may have supported capping property taxes. If you're an urban county, you have a lot of growth, you have a big population, you have a lot of sales tax, that can work. But if you're a no growth or a slow growth county like Mendocino, you're rural, when 2/3 of your tax base is capped at about 2% per year, and inflation for the sort of materials and labor that a county needs is at 5 or 6%, you have a board of supervisors that has to cut 4%, maybe every year. And that's been happening, I'm arguing, since about 1978. And there's different ways the county has dealt with that. Underfunding pensions to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Eventually catching up with us. Not paving roads, deferring maintenance on buildings, letting microwave communication sites fall apart. That kind of deferred maintenance, I consider to be an undocumented negative account balance. We're just not tracking it, but there's a cliff somewhere out there in the future. I think that cliff is a lot closer than we recognize, and we're feeling the effects now. So I said that this is going to be a positive session. Here I am describing what's wrong. I think what's positive is, if we can identify that this is the actual problem, instead of focusing so much on fighting other areas of the county or pointing fingers, we start working with the state. We've got a structural problem. rural counties in Northern California don't have a sustainability plan. Does everyone know Chris Rogers, our new assembly member? So I ran with Chris. Some would say I ran against him. We're actually friends. He had me in a meeting with some assembly members last week talking about maintaining landlines. He's all over Mendocino County. He cares about keeping our hospital open. He cares about telecommunications. He's listening to what I have to say about roads and our inability to fund. I've asked Rotary to consider inviting him. I think we have a good conduit to the state right now. He's full of energy. And the message needs to be, whether you're looking at the lack of a water system in the town of Mendocino, or lack of road repairs in Walla, or the question of whether we can sustain a hospital, it all comes back to a structural public finance model that sets us up for failure. And I think just having that conversation, so I've been bringing it to the Board of Supervisors, and I think there's been some resentment. Ted keeps pontificating about the structural problems. And this last meeting, Supervisor Haschek, who's chair this year, at the end of the meeting asked if I would want to work on that with him. And yes, I do. I've been going back to the 1960s budget books forward, documenting what I think has happened. And that sounds easy. If there was consistency, it would be easy, but some years the jail was under the sheriff, some years it wasn't. These are budget books put together by typewriters in all different formats, right? What information they captured was not consistent over the years. But I'm trying my best to tell that story, and I plan to present it, hopefully here in the future, and also to the state, that this is what we're looking at. We see the trend lines. We're gonna have less and less services to the point we can't meet mandates. In some ways, I think we're there today. So I think it's positive to work on fixing the core problem instead of just bickering about why the county is doing so poorly providing services. When you ask questions, remember the district is huge. It's from just north of where we sit today, all the way south to the Sonoma County line, inland to Hopland, wraps around the west side of Ukiah. If you drive that, it's about 6.5 hours. And the best way to work with a county supervisor is to pick up the phone. As much as I love coming and talking to groups, best conversations I have are those one-on-one. People will have asked, why don't you write it down and send it out? And the reality is, it's the conversation that creates the value, right? It's not what I have to say, it's what you ask me in that back and forth where I learn more about your problem and you learn more about the constraints of working with the county. The position of supervisor is supposed to be executive, quasi-judicial, and legislative. Legislative in that we can make local laws. Well, I'll tell you, we can't afford to enforce any of them or carry any of them out. So we're not doing a whole lot of that. Executive, I can't actually direct staff. It takes 2 of my colleagues agreeing with me at a public meeting to ask staff to do something. And I'll tell you, staff will probably say, well, we can write it down, but you don't have any money to do it, right? So there's not a lot of that going on. And then the quasi-judicial is more the public hearings, and where you try to fairly apply code. And we had one of these last week of the water tower on Main Street. There was a question of, could it be demolished? Was it the proper process to demolish it? And I think that brings up, the focus of the county is not the town of Mendocino, it's not the coast. You have 2 supervisors with the coasts in their district, myself and Bernie Norvell. And Bernie is a great ally. I've enjoyed working with him. I think the other supervisors care about the whole county, so I'm not gonna, I don't wanna say that the coast is unimportant, but it's not the same focus as it is to somebody who lives here. You look at Humboldt, they have 5 districts just like we do. Each of those districts includes the coast. I bring this up because next time there's a redistricting, we should think about, if you want equity in the county, if you want inland and coast to have the same political sway, you need to have 3 districts that include a piece of the coast, at least 3. I think Humboldt's done it right, having every supervisor responsible for some inland and some coast. Sonoma County is even a more difficult position, but they have a lot of money. Sonoma County takes the water from Lake Mendocino, lets it flow down to Sonoma County, and then they sell it. And when they sell that water, it funds their county government. So they have 5 times the population, higher median incomes, higher property values, smaller geographic area, They're selling water. Sonoma County has far more per capita. The reason I bring that up is a lot of your questions, I imagine, will be about the county should do something more. And some of those, getting trash cans in the town of Mendocino that keep the animals out, I think in my 8 years across 2 terms, that may be one of the victories. I think we can get that done. But when you talk about paving 1 mile of road, I don't know if the Little River folks are here. They've been coming, oh good. They've been coming to the Board of Supervisors, and I appreciate them because they're surfacing a real problem that affects people throughout the county, but it's not just in their neighborhood. You go down to Old Stage to Walla, and it's the same problem, Fish Rock Road. How many have been on Bell Springs lately? You have 5 supervisors who are looking at a road network of 1,017 miles and 137 bridges. And they're trying to maintain it on a revenue source that is capped below the rate of inflation. Every year they effectively have less buying power. 1 mile of road may cost $700,000 to $800,000. That's if you don't add the fog lane and you do it, you resurface what's there. What a lot of people want is what we would consider a safe road, wide enough that you can paint the white lines on the side of it. You can fit a fire truck and a logging truck coming in opposing directions. That may be $1 million and more. Our roads were skid load roads for pulling trees out. They got chip sealed. They never had a proper engineered fill. So the reason I bring this up is I don't know how to get 1 mile of new asphalt in District 5. I don't even know if we can get it in the county. I tried to get into this year's budget $1 million more for road repairs. This would just be pothole filling. And even that has been a struggle. You have a county that can't make ends meet. So the last topic I want to bring up, and I hope somebody will ask questions about it, is economic development. One path out of this is we get a fair shake from the state. The state decides it's about equity. Mendocino and other rural counties need a little bit more to carry out base services that all Californians deserve. In parallel, we need to build a stronger economy in Mendocino County, and I know Jake is here, and he may ask a question about that. He has some history doing it in other places. Some of that is having people with good ideas who want to carry it forward, but it also takes a community that's supportive of some amount of change. We don't want a dirty coal train, but we can't be against everything. We need some amount of clean industry if we want to have a tax base to sustain services. And last, I want to give thanks to Michael Issel, who's in the audience. He was a director on the Albion Fire District, and his involvement in getting that district from 50-year-old trucks that had plumbing blowing out from rust at fires to an essentially new fleet of vehicles was part of the inspiration for running for supervisor, seeing what could be done. I'm at about, I was going to say 10 minutes, I'm about 17 minutes. Do we have some questions?
Not quite yet. Not quite, give me another 5.
Another 5 minutes. It's a little bit dangerous if you leave me to come up with my own.
All right, I got one for you. Ted, speaking on the budget, will the 10% mandated budget reduction to county departments cover the deficit?
Okay, this was my item. The county's coming up on the annual budget approval. By law, counties have to pass balanced budgets. I would argue it's never been balanced in this county. There's ways to hide deferred maintenance, but when you look at the document, you should be able to show that you're not planning to spend more than your forecast revenue for the year. And as we come up on that deadline, it hit me that we can't micromanage the departments because the supervisors don't have the level of detail to understand what the cuts will translate to in services. So when I envisioned there was a logical grouping of budgetary requests, and what I discovered is there's a flat list. There's a dollar amount for small tools. I don't know, as a supervisor, if I suggest cutting that by $250,000, what projects get impacted? Does it mean a project could get 90% done, but they don't have the pliers or the shovel to finish it? You want some logical grouping so you cut in a meaningful way. The supervisors don't have that information. It turns out the executive office, your county CEO, doesn't have it either. That signaled to me the only people who could make these smart cuts are the department heads. They know their departments. And so I brought an item forward to the board at the last meeting to ask the departments to brainstorm how they would cut 10%, up to 10%. If they don't come up with ideas, we have to do it for them, because by law, we have to pass a balanced budget. And of course, you may wonder what happens if we just don't do that. I asked that question. We automatically adopt last year's budget, which would be ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense in the upcoming year. So will that get us to a balanced budget? Probably. Will you feel the cuts? Yeah, absolutely. You're gonna see less service in this county. We have declining revenue.
This one is on the meeting you mentioned about the water tower. Would you quickly tell us what happened, or what the issue was with the water tower in Mendocino, and what was the discussion? And then also with that, let's see. What is your view about the Board of Supervisors' respect for Mendocino in general, long-term, and supporting other infrastructural issues?
Well, it's come up several times. The cost of running Mendocino Historic Review Board is too much for the county. And I've countered that with, we're generating $5 to $7 million of bed tax and sales tax directly related to a historic town being preserved. And it's not my job to decide should there be a historic district? There is, right? Our job is to carry out the rules. It's part of a local coastal plan under the Coastal Act. There was a public hearing this Tuesday about a request to demolish water tower on Main Street. And again, it wasn't for the Board of Supervisors to decide should the tower be demolished. It was, do we accept an appeal? Are there grounds? And I tend to side on local control. You have a district here. You have a local board. They're putting all their effort as volunteers into interpreting the code, what's historic, what's feasible to preserve, and I give that a lot of respect. Could they make a mistake that needs to be overturned by the county? It's possible, but I think there's a rebuttable presumption that the county doesn't step in and without some serious grounds. So that was a 4-1 vote. I was on the losing end. Over the last 6 years, I've gotten used to losing. And there's times where I want to be a team player, but there's also times where I just can't go along with it. It's wrong, and I think that wasn't the best decision. It may be that we have structures that are in such disrepair that there's no option. It has to be demolished. But I think there's a process for that, and it's hard for me to ask people to serve on a board knowing 3 strikes and Ukiah will overturn it. And there was a lot of important feedback. I don't think it was all surfaced at the meeting. How much respect does the county have for the town of Mendocino? I think any town in this county needs to fight for its own interests. If you don't fight, you're not going to have a county organization focused on what you need. And it doesn't matter if it's a sewer district, it's water, it's a historic district. You have to be active in showing up, making demands. And it's not enough to convince one supervisor. A lot of times in District 5, people will call me and think, I'm their local supervisor, they're in my district. If they have my support, that's enough, and it's not. It takes 3 votes. And remember, Brown Act, I can't call the other supervisors and lobby them outside of the meeting. My opportunity may be asking 2 questions in a public meeting where there's pressure to keep moving through the agenda to get done by 5:30. You really need to call all 5. You're allowed to talk to all 5. I'm allowed to talk to 1. You have far more leverage in this situation. And I probably already support your position. If it's something in District 5, you have a blanket, there's 99% of the time I'm already aligned with you. But I need 2 more votes in favor.
Well, I heard a couple of buzzwords there, sewer and water. How will increased housing density, which is what they want, be reconciled with the demands on the infrastructure, specifically sewer and water?
Clarifying question, increased housing where?
Increased housing. It's increased housing density. I think there's more for Fort Bragg, but I think overall.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about Fort Bragg. You don't get affordable housing in the unincorporated, because you don't have infrastructure, you don't have water, you don't have sewer, you probably don't have broadband, you're putting demand on ambulance and fire without any sort of reimbursement. You don't have road, you probably don't have a road. It costs a lot more to develop in the unincorporated. So if we wanna see housing, especially affordable housing, market rate housing, we need to think about density. We need to think about where we want that density. The county doesn't directly provide water or sewer services. Those are typically provided by a special district or a city. Does everybody know this county only has 4 cities? Point Arena, I understand, is a small city in the state of California. If you're a city, you have more revenue sources, you have more grant opportunities. Cities are a good idea, housing people in cities versus treating the county of Mendocino as one large city. It provides for better land use and better finance for services. Difficulty is the state legislature in 1992 passed a law that requires a revenue neutrality. So if you propose incorporating, say, the town of Mendocino today, there has to be a finding that every dollar of revenue the town receives, the county has a dollar less of liability. You're not gonna be able to pull that off. Since that went into effect, I don't know that there's been a successful incorporation. Surely in our county there won't be. You don't have the density. It's a money-losing endeavor to incorporate. The only hope is to have special districts with water, the power of water and sewer, groundwater management, fire, and that the tax base for those special districts is parcel assessments. And I know a lot of us feel like we're being taxed and taxed and taxed, but most of your taxes don't go to local services. Almost all of the tax dollars you pay go to the federal government and to the state, and they don't come back. Your property tax in the community and a very small piece of sales tax goes to local services. The issue is not raising the taxes, and I get a lot of emails from people who claim the Board of Supervisors keeps raising their taxes. It's not possible. Board of Supervisors can't raise taxes. Only the people can raise taxes on themselves. The reason I bring that up is, while we push on the state to make good, we also have to recognize that 37 counties in California represent maybe 12% of the population. And Mendocino County is 0.2% of the state population. We're less than a rounding error. So when we think we're gonna go to Sacramento or we're gonna convince our local state reps to fight for us, they're fighting for us, but you got Chris Rogers representing from the city of Santa Rosa north to the Oregon border. You have 27 with the same voting power just in Los Angeles. Where Northern California is outnumbered. Los Angeles and San Francisco Metro set policy for the whole state. We can't rely just on the state looking out for us. We also need to build a local tax base, and we probably need local assessments to provide base level services. Roads is an example. We're one of the few counties that doesn't have a local tax for roads. Our cities have taxes for roads. If you go to Fort Bragg, and you spend money in the city, some of that is going towards roads, and as a result, the state kicks in. There's a component of matching funds because there's self-help. If the county were a self-help county, we would get some additional state funds as well. But I don't want to be dishonest here. If we were to tax ourselves to the maximum allowed, there's a ceiling for sales tax. Would it make a noticeable difference for the roads? It would still take decades. I don't know if we would ever keep up. Half the roads in the county were on a 20-year plan starting in 2019. The other half have no maintenance plan ever. And I'll tell you, it's hard when somebody calls me and they ask about their road. The first thing I do on my phone is I pull up that list. And when I don't see it on there, I keep talking and I go back to the top, hope I missed it, right? I get to the bottom the second time and I have to tell them there's no plan to maintain your road ever. And of course they ask, well, how can that be? How were these plans put in place? The roads in this county were paved with what was mostly a waste product of refineries back in the day. And to give you an example, the loop around the headlands, which I would argue is state responsibility, it's a road in a state park. The state paid the county in 1964 to pave it. $20,000. It's 0.96, it's almost a mile. $20,000. The replacement estimate today is 1.4 million. I get a lot of emails and calls about there's potholes out there. The county crew goes out and throws some asphalt here and there. They try to make it a little bit better than letting nature take its course. I argue that the state needs to pay for that. That's a road in a state park, and we have 1,017 miles to worry about besides that one. But that's the situation everywhere. And recently I flew up to Washington, and I went out and looked at road equipment, and I looked for potholes. I couldn't find one pothole in the Spokane area, not one anywhere. I was out for hours driving. How is it that some of these states that have far less tax revenue are able to maintain roads? And there's a lot of reasons. The complexity of society in California, a lot of the values we have translated into everybody being at the table, putting more emphasis on environmental protection. I agree with these goals. But when you look in the aggregate of how we've implemented an array of good ideas, we've created a system where we're not stopping the greedy corporations or industrial projects. We're making it very hard to carry out the public good. And I'm not suggesting we back away from any of those, but I think that's one of the differences between what we're seeing here versus what you would see in a rural county in another state. Something else I learned is, this came up at a Board of Supervisors meeting held in Willits this year. When we pick up the asphalt in Sonoma County, that was the first thing that caught me, is we're going to Sonoma County to get asphalt. We pick it up in Sonoma, it's 300 degrees, and when it gets to our rural roads, maybe it's 200 degrees. And it may not stay in the hole so well. It's cooled off. We don't have local contractors to buy those materials from that A, would give us a better material because it would still be hot, and B, would pump millions of dollars into our local economy instead of a county to the south. I think there may be an opportunity, and I'm bringing this up today, you may know somebody in the industry or who would be willing to get in the industry. If the county were to structure contracts, maybe it's not the whole county, maybe it's regions, maybe it's not 1 year, maybe it's 3 years or 5 years, in such a way that local contractors could justify the training and equipment to get in the mobile asphalt business, that could be a win-win. We pump money into our local economy and our county's roads hold together better. So it's not just about money, it's also about the way we do the work.
Well, that's a perfect lead into this next question, which is, from a higher level view, just so that we all understand, what are some businesses, industries, activities that we can invest in and support as community members that align the best with both the county, the needs of the budget, and the needs of the people? Like, what are some of those industries that we could build up that won't take away from things and will align well with tax revenue, but also tourism and everything else?
Yeah, I'm not against any of the clean industries. The tourism economy doesn't always provide jobs that support living wages and healthcare. You can have a certain amount of that, but I don't think that we put all of our emphasis towards that economy. It also puts a lot of wear and tear on the county. So if you think of Mendocino, sometimes I think of Mendocino County as an island nation. Imagine the trade deficit, that we're importing all sorts of materials. Every time we go to the store, we're buying something that came from somewhere else. What are we exporting? We're running a huge trade deficit, and we balance that with Social Security payments, and 48% of this county is on public assistance. It's not a great number, right? A healthy economy, you'd have more people self-supporting. Especially when you consider the percentage of children, the percentage of people who are retired, and that 48% on public assistance. Remove the people who work for government, which is the #1 employer by size in this county. That's also bad. There's not a lot of people who are working sustainably. So what the rest of us need to do is support, when somebody has an idea, try to get behind it. And maybe we can't write a check and directly invest in their business, but we can certainly encourage cities in the county to steer clear and make the process easier. I've seen people go out of business before they get started. They're waiting for a permit to get processed. Usually it's not one permit, it's 8 permits, and it's agencies fighting over interpretation. Some of it is appropriate because it impacts public safety. and the environment, but there's also a lot of layers of nonsense. I tried getting rid of the business license in this county. Lake County doesn't have one. Lake County, they presume you wanna do business, that's good for society. Unless you're doing piercings or Christmas trees, there's about 6 categories where you need, there's some oversight. And I tried this 3 times. The last time was a contractor called me, and he said he went into the office on Monday, and he was a contractor, and he knew he should have a license, he wanted to come clean, and they wanted to charge him to do an inspection of his house, and he said, well, I don't work out of my house, why do you want to do a plan check on my home? And so he left and he called me, and I called over there, some back and forth. I thought it was worked out. Wednesday he goes back in and he calls me 8:06 in the morning and says they're now trying to charge him a waiver fee to not inspect his house. And that's the kind of stuff where I need some public support. I'll try it a 4th time if some of you will pack the chamber and say we need to change this. The last time county staff said you can do this, but your board doesn't have any money to make the change. And you can watch the video. I asked, we're not adding anything. We're gonna select a paragraph in a document and delete it. And well, that means you have to have a public hearing and you have to reprint the documents and you have to update the website and you don't have the money to do even that. Which is pretty disappointing when you're a county supervisor. You're trying to represent your people and you can't make the slightest change, but it gives you an idea when it comes to something bigger. If we can't remove a business license fee, those other things on your list are probably gonna be a challenge. Doesn't mean we don't attempt it, but it means we prioritize. We figure out the 2 or 3 things that we wanna get done in this next year. We try to work together. Working together is packing the chamber. The Lower River folks, they may feel discouraged. I don't think they're gonna get their road repaved for this year. The money doesn't exist. But I'll tell you, their participation showing up in that meeting, you now have elected officials asking, are they going to come back? What do we do? And I think that's where a lot of progress begins, is people who don't go away. The vets did it when the county moved the vets to a different building. They showed up and they said, we're gonna be back next meeting, we're not going away. County reversed that decision. I don't think it was the best decision, I didn't make it. But I saw that as a really successful example of, if you show up, just being there in the room, getting up and saying a few words has a lot of power. Often more power than your elected official. My colleagues can vote against me. It's a lot harder to vote against 20 people in a room, looking at them eye to eye, saying, this is why it's important to me.
Is there any correlation between the sources of revenue and the decisions being made? Is there a representative relationship
Yeah,
there?
you're recording this?
Hell yes.
So, I'll probably get in trouble, but I would argue, if you live over here on the coast, you're paying for the county, and they're spending it over there. And they're pretty happy doing that. They've got 3 votes to spend the money that's in the general fund. A lot of the general fund comes from your tax dollars, comes from the visitors that come to your town to put wear and tear. That money is not put into the roads that the visitors create potholes on. The trash they leave roadside, the traffic collisions they get into on the windy roads, not used to driving, the fire department's time going out to the ocean to pull them back. All of that is put onto the general public. When the transient occupancy or bed tax was passed, it should have been earmarked for a specific purpose. Some of it should have been to go back to services in the communities that are impacted by the visitor economy. That didn't happen, it went to the general fund. Reversing that today could be done, but you need 3 votes. And you have 2 of us representing the coast, which is where most of the vacation income originates. I don't see it happening. The people could do a voter initiative. You could collect signatures, you could get it on the ballot. You'd have my support, I'll get out there and collect with you. But you would still be relying on voters from inland Mendocino. Will they support the cause? I think you may be outnumbered.
Couple more specific items. What is your particular stance on maintaining the Albion River Bridge rather than replacing it?
Well, I'm not a bridge engineer. I like historic preservation. I also like safety. It's not a local issue, and I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I want to get as much done for us as possible. And if I start taking positions in federal issues and state issues where I have no authority. I'm putting a line between people who will work with me and people who won't. I wanna work with everybody on getting as much public good as we can at the local level. That bridge discussion is really at a state level. It's a state bridge on a state highway overseen by State Coastal Commission. The county has no standing.
Thank you. To add on to that, we had speakers come to our Rotary meetings twice and gave us 45-minute presentations on exactly that information in great detail with a great lively discussion. So keep your ears out. When we have guest speakers here at Rotary, you're welcome to join. Question, is there any progress on moving the transfer station on Road 409?
The holdup on moving it, my position is it should be moved. I took a pretty strong stance on get it out of the neighborhood. How do we fund moving it? And I assumed that there must have been a plan back in the day, just like the roads. You don't put in 1,000 miles of roads without a plan to maintain them. Maybe the plan is bad, maybe it doesn't work out, but you had a plan, right? I don't think there was ever a plan for moving that transfer station when the county agreed in the long term it would be relocated. So you have my support, you have my empathy on it, I don't know how to pay for it. And specifically, I don't know how to get at least 2 of my colleagues to agree to use county general fund to address a problem in District 4. So if somebody wants to work with me on that and you think there's a grant opportunity, by all means. But like a lot of these problems, you're looking at a $5 to $8 million project, and I'm trying to get $1 million to pave roads countywide. There's a mismatch between the budget we have to argue about and the cost of the project.
Here's a two-parter. This is specific to the way that the Board of Supervisors operates. Can the unfunded pension liabilities be renegotiated?
Not really.
All right.
When you hire a public employee, part of their salary is the pension. They're contributing and the county is contributing. It's agreed at the time of that the work is completed. And they're taking lower salaries in exchange for that pension. You can't 20 or 30 years later decide you're not gonna make good on that commitment. So a pension is a little bit different than a 401k, where the county didn't just throw some money in the pot and invest it. The county promised a certain rate of return at retirement. And what the county contributed to make that happen doesn't generate the rate of return. How could that be? The way I explain it to myself is, in the good years, they skimmed off the top and they called it excess earnings, and they spent that money. And if you do that, you can't average to your target rate. You've taken the top, and now you have some years that are really low performing. It's driving your average down. Never should have happened. You're paying for it now. You're paying millions out of your general fund every year on loans that were taken out to make the pension fund whole. Is it whole today? I don't know. I'm probably the one supervisor who will shed some skepticism on that. When I came in office in 2019, there became a push to get the pensions in an electronic system, and I think about 1/3 of them couldn't be entered because they were in error. There were deals, you don't like your boss, why don't you leave now and buy out the last 2 years? Well, you can't do that under the 37 Pension Act. I think there were a lot of deals that were done that were wrong. I think people were getting payments that may have been too much. Other people were getting payments that were too little. In the end, how much of an impact does that have on the system? I don't know. But it highlights, it still might not be right, because the county time and time again has discovered the pension system had problems. The biggest takeaway is you pay as you go. You don't straddle the next generation with debt. You want to make sure they have roads and they have opportunity. And the position we're in today is a lot of your general fund is going to pay for services that benefited people here 30 years ago.
What is the feasibility of redistricting Mendocino County, and does our geography support that?
The geography is a challenge. You have a mountain range in between. It's a natural separation. The census and redistricting process favors keeping communities together. I would favor the coast having better representation. So, it's a blurry line. What could we get away with that's in the public interest? I think we could push for 3 districts. I don't know if you could do 5 in this county. Might not make sense, but I think you could have 3. You know, a more radical idea would be to convince the state legislature to give Sonoma Coast and Mendocino Coast a new county. And you might find that the inland does better and that the coast does better. Imagine if you had 5 coastal supervisors. This place would be in a lot better shape than it is today. It may be that it's simply too large. You're more than twice the size of Rhode Island, 90,000 people, 1,000 miles of roads. You can spend 4 hours driving and still not make it across the county if you go diagonally. I don't think the state legislature will budge on that. I think they want to send us enough that we don't show up in Sacramento to protest, but not a penny more.
The underlying message is show up and protest. All right, those are all of the questions that I had. I'd like to open it up to public comment and questions. If we could keep them as brief and concise as possible.
I wrote a question on those sheets, and you haven't mentioned the topic.
If it wasn't a question because it was strictly a complaint, I will add it to the notes that he gives afterwards. And if it was a larger question that was similar to several others, I consolidated them. If you felt like the specifics of what you were looking for wasn't addressed, this right now would be the best time to bring that up.
Thank you.
And if you have a pen out, I'm not Ted from TED Talks, that's TED.com. I'm TED.net. If you go to TED.net, my cell phone number is listed. You can text or call anytime you want.
We're gonna start here, go that way.
Ted, excuse me, Colin, well, I am asking you about economic development, the question that you suggested he asked.
Do you want to narrow it down a little bit?
Well, you hoped that somebody would ask you about
Yeah, okay.
economic development.
Thank you. And actually, if we could go behind you to Jake real quick.
Yeah, I have some questions about that.
Jake met with me, and I want to give you an example. The most productive discussions have been the one-on-one. Somebody has an idea, call me, we'll talk for an hour. I'll come out and meet you wherever you are. And if it's an idea I think the county can help propel forward. So Jake called me. We got together at Good Life for about an hour and a half. Can you in 30 seconds sum it up?
In the mic.
I had been talking with Ted about how I grew up here, I left 25 years and came back and noticed that there was a distinct difference when the amount of people that are in the school. And I was kind of wondering about the economics here. So one of the concerns that I see is that at the point that we're at right now, it's not a place economically where you can really make a business investment thinking that you're going to get as good a return as you would in other places. So in order to change it to where things are more good for investing and for being able to start business here, what can we do about that? So that was kind of the beginning of it, and I think I went a little more there.
So why that's important to me is, this is a story I hear quite often. You have people coming back or showing up, and they say the economy's not good, they want to be part of solving it. We don't have a local business community that gets together with roundtables. I don't know that doing it under government is the most efficient. Pretty much everything I see government do is 4 or 5 times less efficient. But I think it's something that should exist. I would certainly be at the table participating, looking at ways the county can make it easier for businesses to succeed. Related to that idea is we have Jackson State Forest, just short walk to the east. And Karen Bowers, who's here today, wrote that resolution the county passed asking the state of California to reconsider the best use for Jackson State Forest. I got a lot of private ridicule on the side. The state's not going to listen. Why are you doing this? Nothing will change. The state did listen, and it's moved that 80-some thousand acres into tribal co-management, looking at sequestering carbon, the best use of that forest. One piece we miss out of that is recreation. Recreation should be in their charter. You look at Bend, Oregon, the hundreds of millions of dollars that come into the local economy from recreation. Recreation teaches people who live in the cities why we need to conserve. There's a win in so many directions. But one win would be the local economy, is you would have visitors coming year round. It's not the focus. If you try holding a marathon out there, you're gonna find a lot of obstacles. There's the once a year ultra. It's possible, but it's not part of the charter, and I think we should work with the state to try to change that. Norm Duvall's son, if you know Norm, he was supervisor at my seat for 16 years. His son builds bike courses. He lives in Canada, builds bike courses all over the world, and he's also identified Jackson State Forest is a missed opportunity that could really be benefiting the local economy without extracting resources or causing environmental impact. So there's a lot of people who come to me, I get 2 or 3 calls, and then they find there isn't the momentum, there isn't anybody to work with. I wanna try to get those people working together, and then of course I'll help the best I can.
Thank you. You probably know why I'm here. I'm really upset about the Cubison case, and I want to know why the Board of Supervisors can't admit they made a mistake and give her something fair in the way of a settlement, be done with it, and move on. The county has all these other problems, and you're setting her up for failure. You're not giving her the support she needs to get back on track. And she's been put through hell, and I just think it's so wrong, and it makes me so angry that we're wasting resources that we don't have on persecuting someone who's been exonerated.
Yeah, so when we talk about the county, we think of it as a monolithic, that it's a single entity. In California, counties have fragmented leadership. I can't tell the sheriff what to do. You remember last time I tried to tell him what to do? It didn't go over well. Now we're friends, I'm not doing that again. The same with the district attorney, the same with the tax collector, the assessor. You have elected department heads. Some of them the jobs are specified in the state constitution. We allocate budget for them. We have to give the DA enough budget to perform his public safety duties. If we don't, he'll take us to court, and the court will probably do it for us. But beyond that, we don't have interactions. I probably talked to David Eister 3 times. One of them was, at a public event shaking hands, very minimal conversations. You read the news and you think there's the supervisors and the DA and the sheriff behind the scenes are doing this or that. I don't know of any such thing. And I read on KZYX a couple days ago that the Board of Supervisors voted to charge somebody. Board of Supervisors can't charge anybody. We can't vote to charge anybody. Criminal prosecution is by your elected district attorney. He doesn't work for me. He doesn't work for the Board of Supervisors. He works for the people. He's elected by the people.
But you can vote to settle the civil suit, correct?
A lot of what I read in public news about what's happening in the county, in all regards, not particular to that case, and what I see actually happening, usually there's a huge discrepancy. And if I took 3 people in this room and I put them in my seat, listening to everything, they would see, it's not quite as what's reported. And that's really difficult. News is a branch of government. If you don't have good journalism, you don't have good government. And I think it's been a real challenge in that there's not a lot of money in news reporting. So a newspaper can't pay reporters like it could 50 years ago, 100 years ago.
They're our
Maybe,
only source. You're not telling us either. How do we get other information?
well, if you watch the meetings, that is your best source of information. If you read the Anderson Valley Advertiser about what happened in the meeting and you watch the meeting, you will find that there's a huge discrepancy there. And so I feel like I'm put in a position to answer questions about things that often aren't real.
I know it's not your responsibility, but could you give us your opinion of whether the Jack Peters Bridge will ever be done?
Well, the alternative is we don't see work happening, right? I get a lot of complaints about the noise and the delays. I'm also thankful that there's money flowing from the state to local infrastructure. Right? Imagine if we were in the position that we needed these repairs and we weren't seeing the money, and that could happen. You look at where the state is on finances, how favorable California is to the federal government right now. It's amazing that we have work actually happening. When will it get done? I don't know. I pass on questions to them. I get some sparse answers back. A lot of it is contracted out to firms and we don't know exactly. There's a window. And I think the state's pretty good about sometimes paying performance bonuses if work is done on time or ahead of schedule. So there's some incentive to get it done, but when will that wrap up? I don't know.
I have time for one more question. And then I'd like Ted to share his email address one more time so that we can get all our follow-up questions and anything that hasn't been addressed directly to him.
Thank you. Karen Bowers. This may be politically incorrect, but we've talked a lot about the structural problem of what's going on in the state budget and the county budget. And we talked one day about Prop 13 and whether any reflection politically would ever take place on that. And the difference between a state that is basically at the beck and call of Prop 13 problems versus places that have a state income tax. I was just wondering if Chris Rogers and any of the people in Sacramento might look structurally at that issue and at least start talking about a plan to get out from under the heavy-duty weight of Prop 13 on local entities.
The motivation for 13 was good. You don't want to have seniors evicted because they can't afford rising property taxes. But I don't think everybody at the time put together, Walmart doesn't die, Safeway doesn't die. Those corporate holdings don't ever change hands. And so their tax rate is based on the property value in the 1970s, right? So the inequity there that, yeah, we were trying to protect seniors, but we've crippled society not having a tax. So there's been attempts to try to remedy it, to allow taxation reassessment of the corporate holdings. Hasn't been successful in the state. But the other possibility is the state generates a lot of revenue from income tax. It's just not flowing to the counties. And what the state has done over the year is said, here's a service that the state probably can't fund properly. Give it to local government. They can do it better and give them some money to carry it out. But what the money that they give us isn't enough. It may be 60 cents on the dollar. And then we're left holding the bag. So DMV, the state runs. Social services is done by your county. Behavioral health is done by your county. All your county roads are done here. There's a lot of push it down to a local level so the state can rid itself of the funding obligation. Well, if the state can't afford to provide the service, how do you think a rural county is going to be able to provide it? So I think yes, Prop 13 needs some tuning for basic equity, but we also need to be vocal with our state reps that we need more of the state tax base flowing to cover the services that every Californian deserves. Every Californian deserves clean drinking water. You don't have a drinking system in this town. You have shallow wells. You have people, restaurants, struggling to meet requirements, doing their best to clean that water, and I think they're doing a good job. But do you expect a town like Mendocino to be able to pay for its own sewer system and its own water system? I don't think it's realistic. I think that's a state obligation.
Thank you very, very much for your time, Ted. One more time. What's your email address?
If you go to ted.net, you'll see all my county email address and my phone number. My cell phone, 937-3500. You can text. A lot of people think it's a landline. I don't have a landline. I wrapped that stuff up and threw it off, said come pick it up. So you can text that number. That is probably the best way to get a hold of me. Chances are I'm either on a road out of service or I'm in a meeting. If you text me, I'll write back during the meeting or I'll call you back as soon as the call's over. If you can't text, leave a message and I'll call you back. Thank you.
Thank you.